Hello, jewelry lover. My name is Bella Naiman, and I'm the founder of New York City Jewelry Week. Welcome to this virtual program that's part of NYCJW 24. Our theme for the 7th annual New York City Jewelry Week is Wonder and Wander. This theme reflects the multifaceted nature of jewelry as both art and personal expression. Wander captures the awe-inspiring craftsmanship behind each piece, the dazzling, delicate, and/or bold details that turn your head in admiration. Wander invites you to explore the wonderful and wild creative journeys behind the jewelry. It's not just about the finished piece, it's about the adventure it took to get there. Designers experiment, push boundaries, and play with ideas and materials. And this year, New York City Jewelry participants get to see it all unfold. Every necklace, ring, and bracelet is a passport to a new world where innovation reigns and imagination knows no limits. We hope that these programs take you on that journey, and we're very thankful to eBay for being our sponsor and presenting these programs to you. So sit back and enjoy. And we know this program is now live, but you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. Send us an email, a DM, or say hello on the streets, which is where we do hope to see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.
Welcome everyone to this presentation, The Wonder of Wandering Objects. What are these wandering objects? They can be intaglio seals, like what Shari Cohen from Seal Scribe is using. They can be meteorites, gun steel, like Chris Ploof is using, and we're going to discuss that very soon. So these wandering objects, we decided could be anything, fossils, natural elements, recycled elements, but today we were going to concentrate on these two jewelry artists I'm really happy to introduce to you. And we're going to look at what the landscape is, how they got inspired by specific objects, antique objects, natural, extraordinary, unusual, and how it affects their work and how they have to also create maybe different techniques to be able to create beautiful jewelry pieces out of these unusual elements. So we'll start our presentation now with Shari, lady first. But before, I wanted just to show you three other jewelry artists that we like. The first one, clockwise, is Katie Brunini. She works with carved fossils and from animals, bone animals. She also works with prehistoric wood, you can see. The other one is Sarah Beltran. She works with coconut. These ones are with polka diamonds. And the last one, going clockwise, is Ushaba, who works with recycled elements from telephones. So as I said, the wandering objects are very varied, but today we've really narrowed down on two very different jewelry artists, Chris and Shari, because I think their story is absolutely fascinating, how they got to find the objects they're using, how they transform them into very covetable, desirable pieces of jewelry. So here is Shari. Tell us, Shari, a little bit about yourself and how you came to jewelry.
Well, the short version is I was born into a jewelry family where every major milestone, birthday, holidays, was a gift of jewelry of some sort. My great-grandmother was like a jewelry hound and bought her own jewelry back in the early 1900s, like when women didn't do that. And so I'm fortunate that we have some family jewelry. I mean, I'm not talking tiaras or anything extravagant, but we have really beautiful family jewelry from that era. And so that really got me interested in antique jewelry. For like 30 plus years, I've been working in the International Leadership Development Center, training people how to become social change makers, mostly for the UN NGO. So you can imagine that when you land in some places, it's like a very intense situation. I've spent a lot of time in India, in South Asia, in West and East and Southern Africa, and the Pacific Islands. So when I would come home, I would decompress by just like flipping through my iPad, and I started looking at antique jewelry as like a decompression thing, because it was just pretty. It wasn't challenging. I didn't have to think about big global issues or anything. It was just beautiful objects. And one day I came across an intaglio seal. It was a little chalcedony, kind of bluish pink chalcedony rectangle of a swan. And they had photographed it so you could really see the detail. And I thought, oh my God, what is this thing? I didn't know what a fob was at the time. And to me, having a fine arts background, I saw this beautiful miniature intaglio that was hand carved, and it kind of blew my mind that such minute detail could go into a tiny little etching. And at the time, it was very popular to buy them and just wear them on a chain. But they kind of hung down, and the beautiful part of it faced the ground, not outward. And I thought, like, there must be a better way to, like, show off these beautiful things. And I started collecting them, one here, one there. And then when I had a small enough collection, I sat for a while. It took several years to figure out what I was going to do with them, because I'm one of those people that, my wandering has taken me all over the world. And I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of things and visit a lot of places. And I do like to collect little things, not huge collections of one thing, but a huge collection of a few of little things. And so I had a little collection of these seals that I started to build up. And I don't know, one day it just hit me that, like, I could represent them instead of hanging down. I could have the front hanging out and facing out, and people could really admire the beauty of that little seal as a piece of fine jewelry. And so it kind of all started there. I have a love of Georgian and Victorian era jewelry settings. And so my signature setting kind of echoes that Georgian Colette cutaway setting. And I just kind of started from there, set a couple of pieces, sold them through a friend who specializes in antique jewelry. And the first one sold in a couple of hours, and then she said, you need to make some more, so I made some more, and it just kind of kept evolving that way.
So we're going to see why they got so popular so quickly. We're going to look at a few of them. Can you tell us about this one?
So this is from my first cohesive collection, which I launched last year. This time last year, up until then I had just been doing pieces like one of a kind, just according to that seal. And I was doing a lot of custom, and I wanted to do something that was more intentional. And I had been saving up these seals that had like themes of love. So I created this collection called Love Letters. And it was a play on the fact that these intaglio seals were used to seal letters, often love letters. And this particular one is sort of we call it our swirl setting. It's kind of like a play on a yin-yang. And the seal itself is a glass seal that depicts two birds holding the end each of a string with an infinity knot in the center. And it usually comes with text that basically, it's in French, it translates to the higher they fly, the tighter the bond. Meaning, if you let your loved one fly to reach their full potential and you don't hold them back, that strengthens your love and your bond. And so I thought that was a really beautiful, kind of sentimental motto or saying. And so I liked this sort of like swirly kind of effect. It kind of, to me, evokes kind of like wings and the whoosh of air. And that came from, I just fell upon, Instagram is not great for a lot of things, but for some things it's really great. And inspiration is one of those things. And I fell into a wormhole one day about Art Nouveau doorways in, I think it was in Brussels. And I went way down that hole, hours and hours and hours. And I was just fascinated with like all of these swirls and how they repeated. Some of them repeated, some of them didn't, and how they kind of folded in on each other. And there was a very sort of like circular kind of fluidity. And I really liked that because I thought about like sort of the fluidity of real love, where you can like change and shift and accommodate your partners changing and shifting in their lives too. And so that's how that swirl setting came to be.
A few more Art Nouveau doorways that inspired you.
That's the same setting, but this one is all gold without a patina underneath the diamonds. We felt it just worked best because of the color of the seal, and it presents like a more contemporary look as opposed to the blue one, because the patina under the seal under the diamonds echoes kind of a Georgian era silver on top of gold diamond setting technique that kind of has a more of an air of antiqueness to it, whereas this is a little bit more modern.
Now, tell us about dragons.
So I fell into another wormhole with poison rings because they were very popular at the time on social media. And, just like the mystique, just thinking about what it's like to like walk around with a ring filled with poison is kind of weird. But I thought like, this is like, an interesting little like take on lockets and non-poisonous endeavors. And I found this seal, and it's a double dragon. The dragons are facing in opposite directions, it's very unusual to find a double dragon at all. But to find one where they're facing in opposite directions, to me, it was evoking, like people think dragons are fierce, but in the world of heraldry, which is the art of coats of arms and family crests and such, dragons represent protecting one's treasure. And so I started thinking about, what's a person's most, treasured possession, and that would be your loved ones. And I like the idea of two dragons facing outward because they're sort of protecting you, 360 degrees. They're both looking in opposite directions for what's coming. So I wanted some kind of scale texture, and I wanted it to be textural but not sharp, because when you think of a dragon, you think of like sharpness, and I wanted it to be very tactile. So we did the ring, and it's made in CAD, but all of the scales are hand finished and hand polished and hand patinaed so that there's a softness to them. And it's a really nice feeling. In fact, it just sold to a client who has been eyeing it for like a long time, but it was the wrong size, and we couldn't figure out how to size it without rebuilding it, but we finally figured out how to do it. But the thing that I love about it is that she has twin girls, and it's twin dragons. And she's Asian, so it's like got a lot of like dragon. I think she's Year of the Dragon. So it's just very, a very lovely kind of like full circle that it's ending up going to the person that it was meant to be, for, which is how a lot of our pieces are.
I love that story, but there's also the issue that the daughters might be fighting over these two dragons. And I know it's very hard for you to find the same piece twice, because that's the beauty of these objects. You're finding that they're completely one of a kind. And if you fall in love with one, you can't just order Shari, I want it in another color, right?
This is true, but we've already covered that because she has another ring for me, which is this is a fairly large ring. She has another large ring, which has two wings on either side of it with a really beautiful vintage lapis tablet on it. So one girl gets the lapis, one girl gets the dragon. But when you open it up, it says in Latin, protect your heart's treasure. And the compartment is big enough that you can put, a little photo in it. You can put a little piece of paper with like a wish or some other saying on it, or little photographs. I wanted it just to be like this nice little kind of thing where people don't know that it opens, but you know that it opens.
And since you talked about the making of, with a CAD, how difficult it is sometimes to resize a ring because of very specific technicalities. And we'll talk a lot about also technical and manufacturing and making with Chris later. But how difficult is it technically to work with a pre-love antique object, because you have to adapt it to a modern setting? What kind of challenges do you encounter when you work with these fobs?
These antique and vintage seals, they have their own limitations, which is partially why my latest collection is what it is. We can talk about that later, but they can be brittle. They're oftentimes chipped. More than anything, it doesn't matter whether it's a carved piece of hard stone like chalcedony, bloodstone, quartz, what have you, or if it's a glass molded seal. The one thing they all have in common is they're like wonky, and they are not plumb on any side, which drives jewelers crazy, because when you're trying to make the setting, a lot of times I have these very like kind of harebrained ideas about what I want to do with the setting. And, the jeweler will look at me like, really? Like, have you looked at this thing on a scan? And then we'll scan it and see, like, I don't realize how wonky it is until we scan it into the computer. And it's like every side, every angle, every plane is wonky. And so, you can polish that out to some extent, but it's never going to be plumb. So those are issues that you have to deal with. Like, how do you compensate there have been times where I've played up the wonkiness, where like when you set it, let's say with 4 prongs, it kind of looks a little lopsided because that's just how it looks. So I can move the prongs to make it the prongs even, but I can't change that. So you always have to split the difference really and decide how you're going to work with all of that stuff. And it's not the kind of stuff they've lasted. Some of them 300 years. I think they're suitable for daily wear, but you need to take care. If you're very hard on your jewelry, like I have a recent client decide to go with a solid gold cast version of something because she's very hard on her jewelry and she knows this. So I was like, kudos to you for understanding that you're hard on your jewelry to start with. So for her, she likes to stack on top of stack on top of stack. So solid gold made sense to her. But normally I tell people, like, you just have to take care. You wouldn't put this in an ultrasonic cleanser because it could crack the seal. So, I can't guarantee that. So I always tell people just, gently clean them by hand with, a damp cloth. But they're just wonky physically. Like the shapes are all, like I said, they're all out of shape. So that's always a challenge, especially when you're making something like a ring or a necklace and you want a certain amount of precision. You don't want the eye to be distracted by the line not being correct. So we're always trying to figure out how to mask that.
We're going to move on to inspirations for you. Tell me, how do we... Oh, sorry. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I don't want you to see the new collection just now. Why not? Well, how do you combine? I know you mentioned it. You have a background in fine art. You have, you widely traveled, and you have these antique objects. What other inspiration? We've seen the Art Nouveau doors. How does these two connect? Tell us a bit more. I was intrigued when you put them together.
This is a Calder drawing. I grew up in the New York, New Jersey area, and so I was very fortunate as a child to be taken around to all the great museums of New York since a very young age. And oh gosh, I think it's in MoMA, Calder's Circus. Do either of you know? I can't remember. I think that's where it's housed. Anyway, it was. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's spectacular. And as a child, it's just magical to see that whole thing. And so I've been smitten with Calder since I was a little kid. I love the whimsy of it. It just always makes me smile, and I could just stare at those mobiles forever. But I don't often look at his drawings, and so I came across this drawing as well as some others, and you can see in the mouth, you've got these curly cues that kind of curl out, and then on one side they curl in on themselves. And I started playing with that idea of what can I do with that with a split shank, which is how I came to the designs for the next 2 rings that you showed. So the one on the green one, they arc out, and the one on the right, they arc in, sort of evoking the heart. So I was just kind of playing around with if I was Calder, how would I do this? Not that he would do this. His jewelry is much more robust that I've seen, but I'll take an element of something that I like and just kind of see how I can translate it into metal or into gemstones or what have you.
That's the wonder, right? That's the wondering part of everything that we are, coming from childhood memories to objects we collect to our inspiration when we are jewelry artists that comes together as in a holistic way.
Yeah.
And Shari, you just released a collection. I think it was just last week, actually, or 2 weeks ago. And we have a very, I would say, glamorous inspiration, also traveling, Cannes, Monaco, Saint-Tropez, Portofino, Capri. So tell us about this new collection, because it seems like it's a slight evolution where, you still see the style of Seal Scribe, but how did you decide to work? And I know you've collected these specific stones over the time as well. They came together as nice suites that you collected together.
Well, first of all, I think I'm just going to take you everywhere with me so you can say all of those names because it sounds so much better when you say it. When I graduated college, I did this sort of like typical American, college graduate thing where you went backpacking in Europe. And when I hit Nice, I was like, wow, this place is like completely different than any place I've ever been to before. And as a backpacker, I remember sitting on a bench outside the Hotel Negresco in Nice with a French person that I had met, and we would make up stories about the patrons going in and out and like what their story was and who they were. And it was just very mysterious to me, like wow, this is a whole other world because I'm a college graduate. I don't have any money. This is a world that's like beyond me. And I remember that at the time, this was early 80s. I would walk along the beaches and you would see women. I'm not going to say it's that mafia mob wife thing, but it was like they were in their little bikinis with their like little gold chains around their waist, but they had like their really good jewelry on their hands. Like they didn't care that they were just at the beach. They wore everything all the time, and that really struck me as like, the good stuff is not just for like special occasion. Wear the heck out of it, like wear it until like you need to like redo the band, like wear it hard. So it really like sort of stuck with me. And I was thinking about I have other collections in my head that are all lined up that deal with seals, but I wanted to do something next that had seals in a more subtle way so that I could show that I can make beautiful jewelry that isn't seal forward on the outside. And so I had this idea in my head called Hidden Messages. This one is Hidden Messages Passport Edition because it has to do with travel. But I wanted to take the seals, and I do have a solid gold and a silver cast line. And so I wanted to take those solid gold cast seals and put them in the under gallery. So they were like a secret hidden message for the wearer only. And then build a really beautiful ring on the outside so that it just, nobody knows what's going on the inside unless you as the wearer choose to share that. And so I kind of took these two inspirations. It's like a dual themed kind of collection because it's hidden messages on the inside. But this particular inspiration is from, French and Italian Rivieras and all of the memories that I have from that, from the late 70s, early 80s time period. I went to school for photography. I have a BFA and an MFA in fine art photography. And even though this particular person is a documentary photographer, I've always been taken with the work of Slim Aarons. There's just like a timeless like elegance in all of his photographs. And so I looked at a lot of his photographs while I was designing this to kind of get in the mindset of like a woman of that era and what they might be wearing and where they might be going. And that's how that all came out. And then my jeweler very nicely, as many jewelers do, has a box. Actually, he has many boxes that they just collect jewels over, loose gemstones over the years. And they're going to do something with them, but they never do something with them. So I was able to go shopping in that box and just sort of pull things together. And then I went to some other stone dealers and pulled some other things. And I just sat with the loose stones for a while until it kind of coalesced and I realized what colors I actually really wanted to use, And then this particular ring that you're looking at, it says in French on the seal underneath, go where I wish to be, which is how it's a common seal that you would sign your letters with, meaning I'm writing to you, Sonia, but I wish I could be there instead of my letter, which is a really nice, sentiment. But it's also what travel places have I been to that I really love that I wish I was again. And I wanted a playfulness. Like I think of Saint-Tropez as being this kind of sultry, sexy kind of exotic playground, but people have fun there. And so I found this beautiful coral oval cabochon, and I love the way coral and turquoise look together and play off each other. Excuse me, but I wanted a little bit of glitz, so we added some very tiny diamonds. Excuse me. And I had a parcel of tiny turquoise cabochons picked out for this ring. And my bench informed me that they would look like pimples. He didn't want to do that. He said, we're going to do something completely different with these. And we talked about doing enamel, and then decided to just hand cut. We hand fabricated these little plugs of turquoise. We had like a little slab of Sleeping Beauty turquoise. So we cut like little batons and then rounded them out and then fit them into each hole, cut them, polish them. So it's very labor intensive, but I just love the way it looks. And, you know, I end up being the kind of person, like, if you could make a ring the hardest way you could possibly think to make it, it's usually the way I end up making it. But I like doing things the old school way. So it's, you know, I like to know that there's been like an effort in like birthing that ring, you know.
I think it's a great conclusion for what we've been doing, taking, you know, something from your memory and taking something with a message that people would have used in a different context to seal a letter for a woman thinking really powerful with a ring inspired by the Riviera. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, Shari, for this beautiful presentation of Seal Scribe and your inspiration and how you used objects from the past into your contemporary collection. And I would like to say also they're very empowering for people because, as you said, they choose sacred messages, they choose aspirational messages, empowering messages. So there's a lot of things that wouldn't have been maybe thanks to you and your jewelry, they've been preserved through the centuries. So something that was in a letter suddenly becomes this extremely personal, intimate piece of jewelry that people wear with them as a talisman and as a empowering objects. So I think that's really beautiful how you preserved and brought into the present and the future as future heirlooms as well.
Thank you. Thank you for getting
it. I just love to say, I mean, I find the object stunning, you know, and when I found out, Shari, that you and I were going to be speaking together with Sonia, I went online, I looked at your website, just fabulous, beautiful, beautiful pieces. And the thing that you mentioned, Sonia, so that whole empowering thing, these are like these little talismanic objects is the way that I see them. They're just really special, really great.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say one more thing, you know, sometimes people contact me and they're like, oh my God, do you still have this ring in stock? Like, you know, and I've had it for a while. I'm like, yes. And they're like, I have to have it. And it's not a great business model, but it's like, I can't do anything about it. The thing is, when you make, I do a lot of custom, but when you make inventory and collections, you know, you're just taking a chance that somebody out there is going to love it as much as you do. Otherwise, why do it? But sometimes a piece has to wait for its person to find it, you know. Either the person can't afford it at that moment, or they don't know about you, or for whatever reason, it's just not on their radar. But I really I have so many of these, like, you know, esoteric moments with people that I realize that, I mean, it sounds kind of like, you know, but they really are looking for their person. I just make them and then I put them out there, and it's like they attract who they attract, and it's like it's almost like I feel like a matchmaker sometimes, which is it's fun, you know. It's like it went to the right person.
I love it. And it traveled through the centuries as well, to that person through you. You were the messenger. Thank you so much, Shari. Chris, I think now we're going to move to your creations. Very, very different from Shari, but still with an extremely powerful storytelling, a dedication to creativity, to use things that not a lot of people would be familiar with, to create beautiful pieces. A lot of them are wedding bands, so very emotional, powerful rings as well that people would wear to show something. And I think we're going to have a really nice presentation now about your work and how you create from meteorites and from gun steel and other elements that are extremely unusual in jewelry.
Yeah, thank you. I leaned a little bit, since a lot of what we do is production pieces and we're making, you know, the same piece over and over again, as opposed to the beautiful objects that you've created, Shari. I leaned a little deeper into my inspiration, not so much as it speaks to each piece, but, you know, I mean, for me, my whole life has been about patterns and geometry. I mean, I've just always loved geometry, always loved patterns. Things don't have to be symmetrical, of course. There's some great patterns that you know, look very chaotic at times, but, you know, they're really everything to me. You know, in many cases, I'm lucky that I get to create patterns such as, the Damascus steel that we forge. We're not here to talk about that today. But, the patterns that we're going to see today in the meteorite and also in the shotgun barrel, one was created by nature. One was created by some very skilled artisans in Belgium in the late 1800s. But I was going to lead in with a few of the things that I find inspirational, whether architectural, case here in New York City. And, I visited, this is actually January before COVID exploded. COVID was already starting. It was also a cold day. COVID was in the news. So, sort of almost had, this beauty to myself, and absolutely amazing place, and really a meditative almost spot for me to sort of just stand and enjoy the movement of the people and the object itself. And then as you, go in and out of this object, if you've ever visited in New York City, every angle changes. You look to the left, you look to the right, you look down, you look up. It's just absolutely an incredible piece, and certainly a pattern. I also love architecture, so it's the type of pattern that sits very well with me. Just a really lovely place to visit. Another pattern here, and this was another January trip. I guess I like to do my traveling in January. This is in Venice. Actually, it's the old post office, and it's looking up from the little cafe in the center. And I think we're either enjoying a coffee or a spritz and looking up and enjoying that. Another beautiful piece of architecture and a pattern. This is a Sisyphus table. It's a small art installation. I have one at home and one at my workplace. And this is made by a gentleman named Bruce Metcalf in Minneapolis. And essentially, it's a CNC machine driving a ball bearing through sand, and you can see just this crazy variety of patterns in this time lapse. It's absolutely beautiful. Certainly love the geometry and the patterns that are occurring and coming here. This next slide that we're going to see is also another time lapse of me using a straight line engine, and this machine is a plant straight line engine. About the second quarter of the 20th century is when these were prevalent, and the patterns they cut. If you've ever seen a Fabergé cigarette case with this beautiful patterns, very shallow cut, but they refract light incredibly. You can enamel over these patterns and things, but you're able to offset and stagger the patterns and adjust the patterns. I'm actually working on a set of titanium knife scales here for a friend of mine who's a knife maker, and just putting this beautiful little textured pattern. It's a hand crank machine, absolutely just a super neat machine, and very fun to play with and to use. And I love machinery and tools. That's another thing that sort of leads me down some of these paths. My favorite toy from my childhood. This really was, and I remember using this in the late 70s. And I think it was I had inherited my uncle's. But if you've never used the spirograph, the way that it works is you put your pen in it and you spin it around, and it creates these drawings that you can see forming on the screen. So geometric, very interesting, color, a kid's toy that I really enjoyed as a child. So we're going to have next, and I don't know why this is, there we go. This is actually an adult toy. So this is a epicycloidal drawing machine that's hand crank, and another time lapse here, and it does very similar things to the spirograph. I mean, just really inspiring. Absolutely love patterns, and I love things like that. Nature provides us with patterns. This is a little bit more of that chaos theory of patterns, some koi at the Portland Japanese garden, but beautiful patterns and markings and colors and motion happening. And here's some more motion. This is a beer garden in the city that I live in, and it's looking at the chaos that is this rotary and traffic trying to come and go. And what's missing from here is the honks and all the craziness that was actually going on at the time. But again, more patterns and more chaos. A little bit of the chaos theory of patterning. And this next little time lapse I have for you. This is sort of kind of sums it all up for me in a lot of ways. We're going to have geometric pattern that's being arranged in a pattern, not chaos at all, but really just a fabulous pattern here. And it's something that I'm really enamored with. It's actually, this is our roof that you're going to see, and it's when they're assembling our solar array. And the guys who did this, they really loved the idea of having this filmed. So we had filmed a little bit of it, and then we were using a GoPro up on the roof, and we have a big peak, and then the other half of the roof where the rest of the panels are. I got worried. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot forgot to turn the GoPro. They were so excited about filming this on the GoPro. They've been turning it back and forth and doing it and assembling this pattern for us. But, that's, as I said, the top of our roof, but was just really a fabulous day. More pattern and rotary motion, pattern in motion here. This is one of my Rose engines turning, and we cut some rings on this, not our meteorite rings or our shotgun, but more of that pattern. And just my inspiration really just comes from motion and mechanics and tools and patterns. I don't really find myself as a jewelry designer. I find myself more as a recognizer of patterns and a designer of patterns that we happen to be able to put them into jewelry. This is a little video though that it's, I guess, the way that I would think about this is I mentioned motion. Motion's always been very important to me, and work is also important to me. And I guess one of the big things, and I find this as an inspiration to myself, is I do feel like I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet. My background was not in jewelry. I, did not come from a line of jewelers. I, was a son of a high school teacher, and I had a lot of my family who are engineers, and I chose to join the military when I got out. But, my inspiration has always been in work and finding something that I really love to do. And I do consider myself one of the luckiest people on the planet in terms of finally, even though it was a little later in life, identifying what I wanted to do. But here's a little short video about that explains it better. It's about 5 years old now at this point, but it's still pretty pertinent.
I think one of the reasons also why I love what I do is I was very lucky enough to find the skill set that works for my hands and my brain. I don't want to always be downstairs smashing steel, but I love it. I don't always want to be upstairs making a ring, but I love it. And one of the really nice things about the whole sole authorship, besides, taking so long to make a product, is the fact that, we get to do this whole variety of jobs throughout the whole building. I mean, we have a very small staff here, but we have 10,000 square feet of tools and fun stuff. Just the variety for me is what keeps me going every day. I love what I do. I love the challenge. I can't distill it down to, it's not the smell of the forge. It's not, it's not the noise of the power hammer. It's not, the noise of the jeweler's saw upstairs. It's just a matter of just being in love with all facets of this process. And again, it's the variety of things that I get to do in a day. It's making sure things are perfect and the quality is high for our customers. I love all the facets of what I do. I even love answering the phone. Constant discovery is it's my drug, my fuel, my caffeine. Yeah.
So that sums it up a whole lot better than I personally could sum it up. It's I love to work with my head, my heart, my hands. Very much a fan of the Roy Crofters and the arts and crafts movement, and things that were accomplished. I love to make a quality product for our customers. But I want to move on to some of the objects that we're making with these other materials here and keep this rolling. So we. It was many years ago, would have been the late 90s, I bought my first piece of meteorite, small little piece of meteorite iron. And I said, well, this is metal. I should be able to forge this or do something with this. I was in school at the time, learning how to make jewelry, a program which I left and then took a formal apprenticeship. This is preparing some of that same meteorite and getting it ready. We have to cut it into slabs. And part of, what's been really interesting through this whole process is what do you do, with a meteorite? How do you, take the meteorite to the next level? And, we were very early on working with meteorite. We started to mess around with the idea of making these full meteorite rings. I say we now because it's a group of we, but I guess it was just me back then. There were a few other people working with it. There was an artist, Jacob Alby, I think had just started working with it. He's in Vermont doing some beautiful pins and things. I wanted to do rings, and I didn't want to be cutting out a whole chunk of meteorite. There's a few issues with meteorite. It is an iron. So like any other iron, it can rust. We've found that by the process that we take the meteorite through, the forging process that we take it through after we cut it, greatly enhances the corrosion resistance of it. It's still not perfect. You do want to take care of it. You don't want to leave it in a puddle of water, but we just tell people to wear it all the time. And we are naturally oily creatures that secrete our own protective coatings. It's very durable. You can see some of the beautiful pattern here. This is called Widman-Staten lines, and this is caused by very, very slow cooling in the vacuum of outer space. When something happens, a planet explodes, a star explodes, whatever, it takes a long time for the pieces to cool. It's a rate of a few degrees every 1,000 or so years, and that's what causes these big crystals to grow. This is Gibeon meteorite. It's the only meteorite that we use, but part of this fun for me and the inspiration is how do you do it? We cut it into slabs. We have to cut pieces. We forge it. We do some heating and cooling cycles to it, and then we have to figure out how to bend it around and turn it into something and solder it. And it's just very fun to work with a metal that's not of this earth. Just really. So, the enjoyment, for me also comes a lot from, what we're doing and how we're able to take these and materials and process them. Figuring out what flux to use, figuring out what solder to use. It was this whole odyssey, and I feel like we're pretty in control of the situation now. But even the meteorites get natural inclusions that'll sometimes throw us for a loop and take us out of our comfort zone quite readily, like that dark spot, that you see right in the center of the darker piece there. And those are the same meteorite, just shot in different lights. So you sort of get an idea, and it will almost change and reflect lights. So some of our rings sitting on a piece of meteorite, we line them, with really any of the precious metals. There's palladium 500 in the bottom there, an alloy of palladium, yellow gold, red gold here, palladium, white gold, platinum, yellow gold, some diamonds used, and the meteorites. Again, a few other rings, some mocha megane. We also make mocha megane, which is very difficult technically in the upper right ring there. You can see that on those rails. A whole variety of things, another diamond there set into some meteorite. Shari mentioned the difficulty of creating and doing some of these things, and we're mostly a fabrication shop. We cast very little. So yeah, there's always this, how the heck is this going to work? Scratch, 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 and that's, again, it sort of really fuels my desire for creating, though, too. And a few more here. And I think that's going to be it
That's
for
very
meteorite.
impressive, Chris. And I'm just wondering, beyond the technical challenge, that the people, do they take it as a conversation starter? What do you use meteorites? Why would I wear a meteorite on, in something that's an intimate object? What's the story behind the ring that you can communicate to your collectors?
Yeah, so we'll back up just so we have a picture of meteorite and we're not stealing our thunder here with the shotgun barrels yet. So the most interesting thing that ever happened to me, I mentioned going to school. I went to a school for professional crafts. I won't name it. It's a 2-year program. And it was about 2/3 of the way through the first year, I realized that I should be calling it a school for professional crap. It was all about creating things that were art. And I did not feel like I wanted to create art at that point. I didn't want to make bracelets out of dirty coffee filters and copper wire. I wanted to learn how to set stones. I wanted to learn how to polish metal. I wanted to learn how to work metal. So I took a formal apprenticeship, and I'd already been playing with the meteorite a little bit, and I had made a few silver and meteorite rings, which never sold. Nobody wanted to buy silver, but you add gold to something, and all of a sudden people notice. And the person I was apprenticing with, he said, my friend Neil, he said, well, why don't you make one with gold, and we'll put it in the case. And I said, oh, I don't have the money for that. Gold's $270 an ounce. What are you, crazy? Well, days. I sure miss those days. But he said, well, here, look, I'm going to give you a piece of 22K, he said, and do it, make the ring. So I made the ring, and, we put it in the case, and it had been in there for, a couple of weeks, and the door would be open from our little shop, and my bench was right by the door. And the door was open, and Neil's brother, Chuck, they owned the store together, was talking to a customer. Actually, it might have been Neil talking to a customer, and he was a monk from our local abbey. And he apparently, when you get to a certain level, and this is something I didn't understand being a Unitarian, we more understand, we pray to whom it may concern, but I was fascinated, and I'm hearing this conversation, and he said, he said, what's this? And he said, well, that's 4.5 billion year old Gibeon meteorite with 22 karat gold. And I heard the monk say very clearly, said, this is the ring that I want. He said, this is the perfect match between the heavens and the earth. It's 4.5 billion year old meteorite from outer space and 4.5 billion year old gold from our planet. And I was like, holy cow, that's powerful. And that was also sort of when I realized, much like I know, Shari, you said earlier, you said, well, it's kind of woo-woo, and this is my woo-woo part. I mean, everything that I do is really important. We're a good vibe shop here. What I mean by that is we're making wedding rings, and while that marriage might not last, by God, it's our duty to think that that marriage is going to last 1,000 or more years, and to make sure we put all the best vibes into that ring that we're giving to our customers. So, that's super important to me. But yeah, it's sort of this real magic of I love this metal and I love the interest of this metal, and then really kind of came down to that one incident and just sort of being really woken up. And that was the first wedding ring that I ever sold. It was a marriage of a monk to his order, but that was my first wedding ring, which I think is also kind of funny that my first wedding ring went to one person to marry the church. But hey, these things happen.
This is fantastic, because this is actually a common thing between you and Shari, that Shari also started in the spirit. It would be engagement rings, because beautiful, a bit different. And actually, it turns out, I hope I'm not mistaken saying that, but a lot of the people are buying the rings for themselves. As you said, women for their daughters, women for a specific occasion, or for themselves. So we have the same thing. It's like when something has such a powerful meaning, obviously an extraordinary design as well, something completely out of the ordinary. It's actually not just in the bride, it's behind the bridal, which I absolutely love, that you have these two things with completely very different styles of jewelry.
It's my job to make a quality product if I'm going to charge money for it. One, I do believe that. I don't believe in fast fashion or disposable fashion. And the other job that I have is I need to make it good enough, at least in my mind, that any one of the rings that I've created, if someone gets old and it gets handed down to their son or their daughter, it could be handed down to a son or a granddaughter. I like this idea of treasures. These are not nearly as beautiful or as fancy as the treasures that Shari's making, but to me, it's equally as important that that daughter with the dragon rings and then with the wing ring, that you'd created, that these are treasures that are going to get handed down. These are talismans, and they have a lot of meaning for me. There's some of the materials that we work with that we're not really talking about here today, but we make a carbon fiber ring, but it's sizable. And the only reason we would bother offering carbon fiber is if we could make a sizable ring. There's tons of rings out there that are meteorite, that are carbon fiber, that are Damascus steel, that can't be sized. Companies like tungsten carbide rings, they'll take these rings back in trade, and say, well, don't worry, lifetime free exchanges for sizing. And that doesn't really work for my ethos. The ring that I got married in, I still wear. And in fact, my wife and I have access to jewelry. She also works in the jewelry industry. We still have the rings we've been wearing for over 12 years now, and the real reality is we talk about new rings, but I can't bring myself to give it up. And I think it's really crazy to make something that you can't hand down to someone, that you can't service, that you can't size, in some way, shape, or form. This is the ring you got married in, the ring you probably held your first child in. I'm not going to tell you to turn it in and send you somebody's other used ring that might be full of who knows what bad vibes. So I just, it's just important to me to do something with longevity to it. It's always been important.
Talking of vibes, now we're going to move to another material that you're using, that you're completely transferring the vibes from where it comes from. That's the Damascus steel and the gun steel into jewelry that is being worn for union and connection and commitment. So tell us, how did you even come up with the idea?
I, as mentioned, was in the military, and it certainly had, certainly have fired weapons. I certainly still, I still like to go shooting occasionally, but I've always been fascinated. I was a historical reenactor, I should mention that, for many years, and I've always been fascinated with things from the past, with things from history. And one of the most interesting things to me is these Damascus shotguns. And the two smaller photos on the right are actually of antique guns. The top one is a Parker Brothers gun, and the bottom one is a different view of a similar Parker Brothers gun looking down the top of the barrels. But it turns out that there was this rich gun-making tradition, late 1800s, early 1900s, of making these Damascus shotguns. And some of them have become highly collectible and highly desirable. And I think they're stunningly beautiful. I mean, just seeing, this gorgeous patterned metal, it's being created by taking two separate metals, bringing them together, twisting them, welding them together, and then you end up with these beautiful patterns. I just find them super fascinating. The larger photo on the left is a Purdy Brothers, I believe a British company, that's a modern Damascus shotgun. They're not even doing it on the barrels. You can see it's on on the side of the stock and on the latch release there and on the trigger guard. But just absolutely beautiful. That shotgun, by the way, that retails for over 100,000 pounds sterling. I think it's about 115,000 US dollars right now that shotgun goes for, somewhere around there. But there are these incredibly beautiful guns. And I really love the idea of getting one, not one of the highly collectible ones that would cost me a fortune, but getting an antique one and cutting the barrels and making rings from it. But unfortunately, if you've ever seen one of these, the barrels are very, very thin through most of the shotgun. So I tried it. I got a barrel, took it apart. They're generally soldered together after they've been forge welded. Got it apart and tried it, and it just didn't work. So unfortunately, that was sort of my first foray into trying to make these shotgun barrel rings. So luckily, I was in the right place at the right time, how these things always work, and I was able to meet someone who had some antique shotgun barrels that had been purchased. They were laying in a factory that he'd purchased that had closed sometime in the early 1900s, and you can see them there. It's my stack of shotgun barrels and a chunk of shotgun. This is the material here, converted into a ring. And then I'm going to roll into one more of those little professional videos that we made 5 years ago that really talks about this. I wear one. I've worn one now for about 10 years ago, I think is when we first started doing this. But this video will sort of explain it a little bit.
So one of my favorite rings that we make now is the Damascus shotgun ring, and that is a relatively recent design for us. I mean, we've been doing it for a little while now, but I, ever since we started working with stainless steel Damascus, wanted to make rings out of Damascus shotgun barrels. The real problem is finding those barrels is tough. They can be expensive, and generally they're too thin to make a ring. We were lucky enough to stumble on what I would call a true treasure trove of antique Belgian Damascus shotgun barrels from the late 1800s that hadn't been finished being made into guns yet. They were designed to be guns, but the factory closed and they got left in a pile, and the factory was purchased and left in a pile, and finally they were lucky enough to come into my possession, which is great. It makes a really beautiful ring. It's this gorgeous dark color. I wear one nearly every day if I've got rings on. It's just very cool. It goes back to that whole history that I love, combining it with, precious metals, lining it with gold or platinum or whatever we do. And it makes just a really nice dark look as it patinas as you wear it. The Damascus shotgun rings are like the meteorite rings we make, that they require a bit of care. This is steel after all. And you put the ring on and you wear it. Don't take it off. You wear it for 24/7. And I've been wearing this one for several years now, and you can see it just patinas out really beautifully and looks really great, I think. One of my favorite rings.
Yeah, so the first one that we made, I coincidentally made in my size. Go figure. And I put it on my hand, and it's never really been off since then. Absolutely one of my favorite rings. And you saw my rose engine working earlier. That second ring that I have stacked up above it here is a rose engine ring. But it's just really neat, and it's a great. So it's sort of, even though I do some sport shooting still, this is a great swords to plowshares story. For me, you can like guns and you can like this ring. You can also hate guns and you can like this ring. Well, I guess if you hate guns, maybe you wouldn't like this ring. You wouldn't want anything to do with them. But, this will never be turned into a firearm that will be shot at an animal or a human or at a target. This is now been fully converted, over into something that, is a wearable. None of these patterns are the same. They're, this should be rolling. I think we're rolling. I'm not sure why we see clouds. Well, we'll get something in a moment. It's only 10 seconds per slide in this little video, so we'll do a little tap dance in the meantime. This should be pictures of some of the shotgun rings we make, and I'd love it if it is. If not, we'll get them out of the PDF. That's why I uploaded both, just to be safe. Yeah, so let's do this. Can we possibly have our, yeah, there we go. Thank you. And then I'm going to skip ahead a bunch of slides. Sorry. All right. So back to our shotgun rings here. Yeah, so red gold and some of that same shotgun barrel material there. And again, as mentioned, if you look at the difference between this slide and the next slide, um, they're very similar. That this is from a shotgun barrel, but they're not identical, and there will never be an identical one. And that's the other thing. It's sort of much as you mentioned, Shari, sort of two people coming together and slightly different designs. And I'm paraphrasing terribly. I apologize. It's the same for me. I love making a pair of wedding rings. They're a perfect pair, except the pattern is ever so slightly different, because what brings two people together are generally, hopefully the same reason, but we're also our own unique people with our own unique identities. And I really, I love that, and I love celebrating that. This is more of that palladium 500 alloy, that lovely gray alloy. I love that with the shotgun too, but my favorite material is probably yellow gold, though, and 22 karat yellow would be my absolute favorite material. I think that gets us pretty close to the end. Other than this ring here, this was a true play. A very good friend of mine who's in the jewelry industry was getting married, and she's like, "Well, I don't have an engagement ring," and she owns a company that makes beautiful engagement rings, and she's a multi-generational jeweler, and she got pregnant before she got married, and no big deal at all. Like, they were planning on doing this, but she's like, I needed a ring for a shotgun wedding. So we made this for her, and that first ring in the video that I showed that had the diamonds on it and the wider rail, that was for her husband. So it's the true shotgun wedding ring. But that's my little presentation, and I'd love to answer any questions if you have them, or clarify things. But yeah, for me, it's about the patterns and science and tools and engineering, and being able to make these beautiful patterns and share them with people, or share these beautiful patterns that other people have made and share them with people.
That was fascinating. Thanks, Chris. I have one question. What do you do once you run out of this Belgium material from the 19th century?
Well,
And then,
we call them limited edition rings
diamond.
currently. Yeah. No, it's I know it's going to happen one day. These are limited edition rings, and it's an interesting thing you mentioned, the meteorite. When I started making these meteorite rings, I could get meteorite for literally like pennies a gram, and now it's dollars per gram. And there's so many people that have knocked us off, and I don't care. Imitation's the sincerest form of flattery. Our quality is still absolutely exceptional, and I believe we're making some of the best out there, because we've got some tricks that we don't share about how we make them. But one day we're going to run out of them, and you know what? I'll be on to the next most amazing thing, and I'll find something else fabulous to make rings out of. I've always got my eyes open for these objects that attract me and that I can use to do something special with.
Both of you, before we wrap up, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your vision and your creation, and also these very unusual elements you incorporated into your jewelry. And there's so much meaning as well, and I love it where we come out. Who are your customers? Who are your collectors? What's the desire and the story behind the purchase? What do you see? How do you see these objects traveling? Where do you see them, the wandering objects? Do you have other objects that you would like to integrate into your creation? Chris is mentioning once they've run out of meteorites or shotgun, it will find other materials. Shari, have you also thought of something else? Because you've obviously expanded this new collection that you've just revealed 2 weeks ago. Is there anything else you could see, other wandering objects you would like to catch and create in Seal Scribe?
Yeah, I would like to explore natural elements, combining natural elements with, high carat gold and gemstones and seals. I have some ideas. I actually have some ideas that I don't want to talk about, but I can't find anyone to execute them, which I don't know if that's a problem for Chris, but I have more ideas than lifetime to explore them, but it's getting somebody that's capable of doing it. Like if I had a Hemmerly-esque jewelry, bench at my disposal, then the sky's the limit. But I have some natural elements I would like to work with in terms of carving and working seals, mottos, and things like that into whether it's stone, bronze, wood, what have you. I just have to see where I can actually do it. But yeah, I'm always thinking. I come up with a theme name, and then I work from there usually. So I just have like a list of like, you know, things I can run through, and it's just a question of what avenue am I going to explore next.
We're watching this space, this journey. What about you, Chris? Do you have I know manufacturing, making is very important, and that's where you enjoy the challenge and the creative space. Is there something else you want to incorporate into your creations that hasn't been used yet or not in this sphere?
So I will. It's funny, and Shari, you mentioned earlier you had access to your jeweler's box of stones, and I'm like, box, filing cabinets full of stones. I call it the Chris Ploof Memorial Museum. So many ideas, so little time. Just like you said, you know, I've got a head full of things that I'm never going to get to. You know, and the urgency is a little bit more now that I'm north of 50. You know, I'm probably over halfway done with being on this planet. So I'm like, oh, gotta make, you know, so we're always running around and going a little crazy. But, you know, to what you said, Shari, finding someone to do things, give me a call sometime. We do a lot of crazy things. You know, one of the big advantages we have.
I was thinking that. I need to call you. So
we've got, I've consulted, you know, around the world for the jewelry industry, you know, and we have a 10,000 square foot shop with 4 full-time employees, if that tells you something, right? We also sell thousands Damascus steel to other jewelers, you know, throughout the year. So, you know, for me, it's never a question of, can I do it? What the question always comes down to is, will it make me happy doing it? Will other people happy doing it? And, you know, and do time to do it, you know. So we're always working on projects, and much like, you know, Shari said, I've got a couple things that are coming soon that I'm not going to tell you about yet. You're just going to have to watch and wait.
Oh, I like a bit of suspense, but I also like how New York City Jewelry Week has become this matchmaking thing for jewelry artists. Look at us.
And I think,
where
I mean,
where are you located?
I'm in Massachusetts, so not far at all. I think, you know, I think one of the most rewarding things that I've been able to do is collaborate with other people too. You know, so whether it's, you know, matchmaking in Jewelry Week or even outside, you know, I feel like some of the best things that I've done. You know, we've got some great collaborations out there with some well-known artists and some other artists that aren't as well known. You know, Lisa Jane Grant, Anthony Lent, Fine Jewelry. You know, we've done some work for some other companies. But yeah, collaborating is one of the big things. That's really another inspiration for me. Is, you know, when you get to work with is it helps fuel my creativity, certainly. So maybe we'll hear from you, and maybe we'll figure something out. We'll find out.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, both. It was really fascinating to listen to your stories and to discover your jewelry. I was familiar with both of you, but I hope, you know, people will want to see more of your work. So Shari Cohen is Seal Scribe. You can find her on Instagram and her website. Chris Ploof Designs, it's also on Instagram, also has a website, beautiful videos that you make that are really, really exciting to watch with all the fire and everything happening there. So, and thank you so much for joining us for this, the wonder of wandering objects, because I think there was a lot of wonder. How do you create beauty for something that's been outside in the world for so long or has been used differently, like an antique seals, and how do you elevate it to an object of jewelry? And I think, you know, you've seen it. It's there's a lot of personality going into it, a lot of thought, a lot of love, and a lot of, I think, you know, dedication to the art of jewelry. And the objects are just the vehicle for creating emotions, as you've both, I think, displayed today so beautifully. So thank you so much to both of you for being wonderful guests.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And it was so nice to meet you, Shari, in person. Absolutely fabulous. Love what you're doing. Keep up the awesome pieces. You're great. Thank you so much, Sonia.
Sonia, you'll be the first to know what we decide to do together.
I hope so.
Yes, how about that? Fair enough.
Thousands of viewers who've joined this virtual event, so they'd be all watching. They'd be all like, "What's happening between Chris and Shari?" So
right, no pressure now. No pressure. Jeez.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thanks to everyone at the New York City Jewelry Week for such a great event to bring together so many different personalities, so many different styles of jewelry, but the same shared passion for jewelry making and beauty and art. So thank you.